Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for another mock draft Monday, another 2025 NBA mock draft today, covering all 30 picks of the entire first round, and I'm very excited for that. Also, on Twitter, I will be posting the second round portion of this mock draft, so go follow over on Twitter. Link is in the description if you want to see picks 31 through 60 of this mock draft as well. I'm very excited for that portion of the mock as well. And again, thank you all so much for the support, by the way. Go ahead, hit that like button and subscribe if you are new or relatively new to the content. I really do appreciate you guys a ton. So thank you so much for all the support and love throughout the early end stages here of the NBA draft cycle in 2025. But first, shout out to the sponsor of today's video. Southern New Hampshire University is one of the largest online accredited universities in the United States. If you feel like you're stuck in a job you don't enjoy or are looking to find a career in the sports world, SNHU can be the change up you're looking for. SNHU's sports management program has courses taught by faculty with real world experience, giving you opportunities to connect with people in the industry. SNHU offers some of the most affordable online tuition rates in the nation and was voted as one of the most innovative universities in the country by U.S. News and World Report. Go to snhu.edu/utilitysports, also linked in the description below, and learn how you can get started with a sports management degree today. The first overall pick, which happens to be my Dallas Mavericks in a stroke of luck, or as some call it rigged, I call it destiny. And the Mavericks here were destined for this pick after mindlessly trading away franchise icon Luka Doncic. Now Dallas, with the first overall selection, has a really unique opportunity to add a two-way ascending star. And that, of course, first overall here in the 2025 NBA draft is Cooper Flagg out of Duke. Not only did he put together an AP Player of the Year type of season for the Duke Blue Devils as a reclassified true freshman, but he was brilliant in a variety of roles. And I think the thing that has me most excited about Cooper Flagg going into the NBA is the playstyle versatility that he is going to offer for an NBA team. And what I specifically want to talk about, obviously in past mocks, I've talked at length about Cooper Flagg's defensive versatility, the impact he can have at the rim as a helper, the impact he can have in passing lanes as a drive helper in the gaps. And then also he has showcased some very good point of attack tools defensively with great athletic gifts and elite shot blocking and recovery tools. But I want to focus mostly on the offensive side in this mock selection here for Dallas and talk about how not only has he stretched his game to being an on-ball prospect more than I think anyone was really projecting 4 or 5 years ago for him when we were just starting to uncover the tape of who he was as a prospect coming out of Maine, but mostly when it comes to his playstyle versatility on and off the ball. Of course, he can be a creator, ran 45 action a ton for Duke with Khaman Maluach, can facilitate 2 staggers and pins. You saw him hit Knueppel and Tyrese Proctor and Isaiah Evans. There's just so much functionality here for Cooper Flagg when he's actually bringing the ball up the court. Just feels like he's able to control an offense, control the basketball, take care of it, and get his team good looks even when he's not trying to just drive and kick. And then, of course, there is that drive and kick element as well with his ability to pivot, get to spots on the floor. One thing he does need to continue working on is his handle to beat defenders more cleanly off the bounce. He shot just 50% on 2-pointers this year, which is about 7% worse than his top 2 counterpart, Dylan Harper, in this draft. So I do think that's a testament to much needed growth still in his actual ball handling capability. But other than that, I think the ability to be a screener and a short roll player and slip and play out of advantage that way, I think Dallas is going to have some unique ways now to get him the ball. And it just takes Jason Kidd to have a bit of creativity on how to do that, whether it's extremely high ball screens to try and force a switch 28, 29, 32 feet away from the hoop, something like that, where, you know, once you do have Kyrie Irving back, Flagg can either pass over the top if Kyrie is setting the screen and you can get Kyrie going downhill 4-on-3, or you can flip that with Kyrie being the ball handler and try and let Cooper Flagg catch the ball about 25 feet away from the hoop with a 4-on-3 advantage, utilizing Gafford or Lively in the dunker spot, maybe Anthony Davis down there, depending on which lineup Dallas has on the floor. I do think for their spacing, this is something that's going to also help Klay Thompson. I think Flagg's expertise as a ball handler, of course, still growing in that area when it comes to his actual skill set, but his comfort with the ball and the ability to pass, make reads will open up the game a bit more for Klay Thompson, assuming he's still in Dallas. So I think all things considered here, the Mavericks get a lot better. On both ends of the floor, Cooper Flagg ties together a lot of their defense, but I think there's a lot of unique ways they can look to use him on offense as well, whether it's with the ball in his hands, as a screener, as a diver cutter, whatever it's going to look like. I think the results are going to be quite good for Dallas long term. Moving on to pick number 2, the San Antonio Spurs here on the clock. And like Jonathan Givony reported about a week or so ago now at this point, it seems like a very real likelihood that the San Antonio Spurs second overall will select guard Dylan Harper out of Rutgers. And I do think this is a great decision for them. I actually have a scouting breakdown of Dylan Harper and his exact fit with the San Antonio Spurs up on the channel from about a week ago. So go check that out. I do think for San Antonio, drafting Dylan Harper second overall is a great decision. And I don't think it requires a trade of either De'Aaron Fox or Stephon Castle. I think specifically going back to my evaluation on Stephon Castle last year, coming out of UConn, I really didn't look at him as a true point guard. And I do think specifically for his role going forward, the best way to maximize Stephon Castle is utilizing him off the baseline, utilizing him as a cutter, a screen and dive type player in the backcourt. And I think for San Antonio, this offers you a ton of lineup versatility now, because Stephon Castle, very good positional size, can really defend both on and off the basketball. And now you're adding in another big guard here in Dylan Harper, someone who is drawing some light comparisons to Cade Cunningham in this draft cycle. Now, I don't think Dylan Harper is quite the prospect Cade Cunningham was. I do think there are some pretty substantive differences in their actual play style DNA, but I do love Dylan Harper's ability to handle the rock, get to spots on the floor. He splits the pick and roll really well, utilizes short rollers quite well. I think that's going to function extremely well with Victor Wembanyama. And I think when it comes to San Antonio specifically, the more talent, the better. The more playmaking juice, the better. Dylan Harper brings a healthy dose of that as well. And now the Spurs have a very good backcourt rotation. And every time we get in the playoffs, the teams with depth, the teams with good quality players and lineup versatility tend to win out. And San Antonio is getting that now. They have the 2nd and 14th pick in this year's draft. They're going to be able to mightily improve their roster now and for the future. And I think the Spurs getting Dylan Harper at pick 2, it just makes San Antonio a very, very good team long-term, one that I'm going to be putting a ton of stock in. I think this team is going to be destined to win a lot of games over the next 5 to 10 years. Of course, Wembanyama is going to be at the center of all of it, but De'Aaron Fox, he's no slouch. Dylan Harper can really get after it and play. I think Stephon Castle is getting slated into a better role for him anyway moving forward with this selection. So I think all things considered here, San Antonio, if you're a Spurs fan, you should be smiling ear to ear right now. Moving on to pick number 3, it is the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, I'm not doing mock trades in this video, but this will be a topic of discussion between now and June 25th, the night of the NBA draft. And I think for the 76ers, all things considered here, they do have to weigh all of their options. Are they trying to go in and win right now with Joel Embiid? They do have Paul George on a big contract. Could this be used, this pick specifically, in trying to offload his contract while bringing in other big talent? You know, names like Lauri Markkanen and Kevin Durant do seem to be somewhat in the viewpoint of Philadelphia at this point based on the rumors and news and speculation. But if the Sixers do decide to keep this pick, which I don't think is a terrible decision if they want to look at the long-term outlook and trying to build long-term around Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, having more good pieces in place, the Sixers take a huge upside swing here on Ace Bailey, 3rd overall. So we have back-to-back Rutgers Scarlet Knights going 2nd and 3rd as Harper and Bailey come off the board respectively. And I think for Philadelphia specifically here taking Ace Bailey, this is going to be a process pick, and Sixers fans might be tired of the process at this point in time, but Ace Bailey is not ready to win right now. I really don't believe that. And if he was ready to win, Rutgers would have been better than their opponents this year when he was on the court. Something that was overwhelmingly true with Dylan Harper, who was a +8 net rating this year for Rutgers. Ace Bailey, on the contrary, was a negative net rating. And while net rating, listen, scouting and analytics, use of numbers in scouting is very important. It is not the end-all be-all. So first of all, him having a negative net rating doesn't mean he's just a terrible basketball player. What I do think it tells us, though, is he wasn't contributing to winning at his current play style and at his current skill set. And I think this is a real long-term projection pick for the Philadelphia 76ers, because Ace Bailey right now in theory is going to be an elite scorer, someone who can put the ball in the hoop, shoot the basketball off the dribble, shoot over the top of defenders. The questions for me, though, is how does he get to the free throw line consistently? He plays with a very slim, weak frame. His ball handling capabilities are not very good. I touched on that as still a current growing point for Cooper Flagg. Ace Bailey's got that problem to an even higher degree, because the one thing Cooper Flagg has is a few gathers, spins, and ability to play into traffic with his body, something Ace Bailey doesn't do right now and is still learning to do. And I think for Philadelphia, if you do take Ace Bailey, it feels a little weird, because you're kind of saying, okay, well, is this really maximizing the Embiid era? I don't know if that's the case or not, but I think for the Sixers in general, what you are getting here, to be a little bit more optimistic, is this very lengthy wing. People, of course, are freaking out that he measured in at 6'7" without shoes on. Basically, he's a 6'9" forward wing type. Like, that's pretty good positional size still. Is it the 6'10" he was listed at Rutgers? No, but I think if you watched Rutgers play at all this year, we already kind of knew he wasn't 6'10" anyway. He just did not look that big compared to Dylan Harper. So I think all things considered here for the 76ers, you're getting someone who does have some two-way upside, someone who I think functioning off the catch rather than out of isolation, which he did a lot for Rutgers this past year, would be a lot better for him anyway. There are some very good cutting traits here that I think with Philadelphia, especially playing Embiid out of the nail, if you do train and coach Ace Bailey hard. And I do think that's a very instrumental part of this. Ace Bailey, whoever coaches him, in an interview a couple weeks ago, he says, I don't have any weaknesses. Well, that's not what the numbers say, and it's definitely not what the tape says. There are a ton of weaknesses here. And for a coach who's going to get in his ear and tell him, you've got to do this, you have to get better at this, it's very important that not only does that coach have a great relationship with Ace Bailey so that there's a trust there, but I also think one of the most important things is guiding him towards success, because when an NBA player starts to find success, it helps his confidence, and it helps him really grow and blossom as a player, doing the things you want him to do and doing them successfully. So I think for the Sixers here, it's an interesting pick, a very difficult decision, all things considered. But I do think it could work out quite well long-term for Philadelphia, as long as they are willing to invest the time and patience in Ace Bailey's development that will be necessary after this selection. Moving on to pick number 4, the Charlotte Hornets. The 4th pick of the lottery, and of course now in what appears to be a 4-horse race at the very top of this year's draft for the top 4 selections, Charlotte is left with their choice of those remaining 4, and that of course here, 4th overall, is VJ Edgecombe out of Baylor, another athletic freak, even to a higher degree than Ace Bailey. Now, Ace Bailey does have very good positional length and size, and of course still can jump out of the gym. VJ Edgecombe has it in more of a compact 2-guard type of body, and I think specifically for the Hornets, this is a pick that people will say is oozing with potential. Now, I think there's still some key areas of growth for Edgecombe to maximize his game and overcome some of his current flaws, and I think right now this is a lot of perceived upside, and I understand it. You look at his steal rate, it was quite impressive, averaged over 2 steals per game this past year for Baylor. There is some real application of his physical gifts, whether it's in transition as a play finisher or defensively as the low man, rotating over and blocking a center at the rim, or making a big-time rotation and showcasing some of his quickness, getting to spots on the floor with good aggressive closeouts where he's not sacrificing ball contain. There are some moments throughout the course of every single Baylor game this year that impressed me big time for VJ Edgecombe, and really solidifies why he could be a top 5 pick in this year's draft, because if you do put together all of those possibilities and all of the things that he has shown the ability to do, And then if he finds a way to make those consistent with the mental focus and the attention to detail and the execution of game plan, Edgecombe does have a higher ceiling than a majority of other prospects in this year's draft because of those physical gifts where he jumps out of the gym. He's got very good functional play strength as well when he plays into traffic, plays into contact. I think from a skill set perspective, we have seen him take steps forward when it comes to some deceleration in his finishing, touch below the rim. There's areas, even with his handle, there's been some flashes this year where you go, oh my gosh, if this guy can put it all together, he's going to be a very, very good player. Now, I do have some concerns about that long-term ability to put it all together and be that standout guy. But this is the type of player when you get into one-on-one workouts, teams are going to be saying, is this the next Anthony Edwards? Is this the next Dwayne Wade? He's got that physical archetype, that body type, and specifically some of the emerging skills. And if you go back to Anthony Edwards as a prospect coming out of Georgia, I mean, he shot a ton of pull-up jump shots, a ton of pull-up threes in transition, and he didn't make a lot of them for Georgia. Yet he ended up being the first overall pick, and with patience, with long-term development, Minnesota was able to craft him, and he and Anthony Edwards himself put in a lot of work to become the NBA's leader in three-point makes this past season. So I think all things considered here for Charlotte, if you draft VJ Edgecombe, you have to have a lot of patience. You have to be able to see it through with him. And I think for Charlotte specifically, they're not in a position where they're trying to rush anyway. They have multiple first-round picks in 2027 via Dallas and Miami and their own. So I think with Charlotte having a long-term viewpoint, a patient approach at this point, VJ Edgecombe is a sensible selection, 4th overall for them in this mock draft. Moving on to pick number 5, the Utah Jazz here, and I think this is really where the draft starts to get very interesting. I think we have a good idea right now that Philadelphia at 3 will probably land on one of Ace Bailey or VJ Edgecombe, which probably puts Charlotte in the position to draft the one that is still remaining. In this mock, you saw, of course, Bailey go 3rd, Edgecombe go 4th. And now at pick number 5, it puts Utah in the driver's seat among a variety of different players, whether it's Trey Johnson, Jeremiah Fears. You could look at big men, whether it's a rim-protecting archetype like Khaman Maluach to be the immediate backup to Walker Kessler and give the Jazz 48 minutes of good center play and rim protection. That's an intriguing option. Or you could look at the flip side and, hey, do we want to get a skilled big man? Obviously, Kyle Filipowski seems like a big hit from the second round last year. Could they double down on that archetype with someone like Derik Queen? I think the Jazz have a variety of options here. Someone like Kasparas Jakucionis could even make some sense as a lead ball handler. But Danny Ainge is going to strike for upside specifically with a player who can create offense and create it consistently. 5th overall, I have the Utah Jazz here selecting guard Jeremiah Fears out of Oklahoma. This is arguably one of the best shot creators in this entire draft class, not only for himself, but for others, and I think a ton of it stems from his handle. He is one of the most creative ball handlers in this entire draft, and he has some incredible downhill quickness where he's able to get anywhere he wants on the floor. And I think specifically if he improves as a rim finisher, his ability to get 2 feet to the paint, play out a drive and kick basketball could open up a ton for this Utah Jazz team, which right now, to me, honestly feels really stuck in limbo. Now, it just takes one lottery ball to go your way, takes one little change in the lottery to have me feel completely different long-term about the Jazz. If they had the 1st or 2nd overall pick this year, I'd be saying, okay, Utah's moving in the right direction. And maybe that happens for them next year in a draft with AJ Debonsa, Darren Peterson, and Cam Boozer highlighting the top 3 picks next year. Utah specifically is in a spot where, yes, they do already have some investment in their backcourt. They drafted Keontae George in the top 16. They drafted Isaiah Collier in the 1st round last year. Do they want to ride it out with those guys, or do they want to go with a player who is just flat out better than them? And that's what Jeremiah Fears is. Even for me, who I tend to be a little bit lower on Jeremiah Fears, I do think he's the biggest boom or bust prospect in this draft. I could see him returning significant value, top 5 value in this class. And I could also see him being a 6-man / low-end starter type player. And drafting that 5th overall here is kind of scary. But I think all things considered for Utah, his ability to handle the basketball, play make out of the pick and roll, get to spots on the floor, and he kind of has that big shot clutch gene, not to mention that Hall of Fame name, which some people put a lot of stock into. I think for Utah specifically here, Fears is just so much better than Keontae George or Isaiah Collier to me, that I think even if this isn't the final touching pieces, if it isn't the final move for Utah to improve their roster, it's still a significant one long term that they should strongly consider 5th overall, and I have them ultimately taking him here in this mock draft. Moving on to pick number 6, the Washington Wizards now, and I think for the Wizards, of course, I have loved mocking them. Derik Queen out of Maryland, keeping him in that DMV area. I know Wizards fans have really liked that, but I wanted to switch it up for this mock draft to talk about a different possibility. And there are a wide range of outcomes, of course, and I think Washington, after what Utah decides to do at 5, is in an interesting spot to still pick whether it comes down to fit or talent. And I think right now Washington is going to look at the talent perspective and try and get someone who can really score the basketball. 6th overall, I have the Washington Wizards here selecting Trae Johnson out of Texas. I thought one of the big winners at the NBA Draft Combine, where he measured very, very well physically. His anthro measurements I thought were quite good for him. And then also specifically his physical testing, where he impressed with his vertical leap and some of his agility drills. I thought all things considered for Trae Johnson here, Washington should be extremely impressed with what they saw from him at the actual combine. And then when it also comes to his skill set, the Wizards, what they need to be better at, and this is very point blank obvious in basketball, but sometimes I feel like we overthink it in the draft community, putting the ball in the hoop is what really matters. Whether it's drafting someone who can stop other guys from putting the ball in the hoop, which is what Washington has done a lot recently with Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly. They've put together a very intriguing long-term defensive front court, or drafting a player who can put the ball in the hoop himself. And Trae Johnson has the skills to do it in a variety of different ways. Has done it off of movement and off-ball action where, hey, you go set him a wide pin or stagger, or he ghost screens, or is the Spain screener in a set play. His shooting, his ability to get balanced and really square himself up to the hoop, those are some of the things that really stand out to me every time I watch his film. I just think with the degree of difficulty and the movement and the velocity at which he's moving, it could be very easy to kind of throw out some of the fundamental mechanics that makes him a good shooter, but he just manages to find a way to get his center of balance right pretty much every single time. And I think that's going to be one of the calling cards for him in the NBA. If you want to set him wide action or just have him play in a variety of different roles, you can do that. And then he also showcased at Texas where he was maybe a little miscast. I think that showcased a bit in the Longhorns' overall season. They weren't the best this year, especially for their standards, and I think a reason for that was the lack of talent around him and how much it did call on Trae Johnson to be the on-ball creator for the Longhorns. And I think for Washington here, now they do have Bub Carrington. They drafted Keyshawn George last year as well. They've already put some investment into ball handling guards, guys who can shoot the basketball. Of course, Keyshawn George more of an off-ball guard than on-ball guard. But I think Trae Johnson's a significant upgrade over that here. And then he also can still create out of the pick and roll a bit. And I think giving him a pick and pop option like Alex Sarr is pretty unique as well, where the Wizards might be able to space the court better than most teams play out a delay action 5 out. And Sarr and his continued growth as a passer will open up the game even more for Trae Johnson. Coming off of DHOs and back cutting, rejecting screens, I think there's just a lot of versatility here that Washington's going to be able to kind of unravel and figure out over time. I don't think this is the final touching point for their rebuild, but definitely one that moves them in the right direction and gives them some legitimate three-point shooting and scoring upside long term, maybe in the vein of a Tyler Hero type of player who we definitely have seen be a number 2 or 3 scorer for very, very good teams in the Eastern Conference before. Moving on to pick number 7 here, the New Orleans Pelicans. Now with both Jeremiah Fears and Trae Johnson off the board with back-to-back picks at 5 and 6, 7 becomes a very interesting question for New Orleans, who drafted Yves Missi last year, and I think they love the early return results from that pick. Now at 7, do they double down and look at another center like Khaman, Maluach, or Derik Queen? Definitely could be an option. 48 minutes of good center play. You can never go wrong. Or do they look in the backcourt? CJ McCollum is going to be in his final year of his contract. They traded away Brandon Ingram, so there's a little bit of the ball handling responsibilities gone. The Pelicans still do need kind of a lead guard, lead ball handler, decision maker, and they have one that fits really well, in my opinion, off of Yves Missi, available to them here, 7th overall. and that player is Kasparas Jakucionis out of Illinois. One of the most NBA-ready decision makers in this entire draft, and I know some people are going to pause and hesitate at that and say, wait a minute, didn't he average like 3.7 turnovers a game for Illinois? Yes, he did, but I think there's a lot of context that's missing in terms of the reliance that Illinois had at times for him to create for their team and the amount of ball pressure that he had to sustain for them. And I think you put him into New Orleans where they're going to be able to play out of DHOs and zoom action more than a majority of other NBA teams do. And I think that's where Jakucionis' off-ball skills, where, hey, if you're trying to deny him the basketball, he's got very respectable positional size, standing about 6'6" with shoes on. He can back cut extremely well, has very good coordination tools when it comes to catching and finishing the basketball, so he can operate as a cutter out of your delay action, which I like quite a bit for New Orleans here. And then also when it comes to his off-ball play, he's very quick and decisive. And what I mean by that specifically is he knows how to set up his defender, whether it's with a V-cut or just a timely move to go get the basketball. And I think that timeliness sometimes can be really underrated. And for Pelicans fans, I want to call back to Jonas Valanciunas and bring back your attention to when Valanciunas was doing dribble handoffs. Well, yes, he was a great screen setter. One thing he didn't do very well was roll quickly to the rim, which is pretty much the opposite of Yves Missi. And I think for the Pelicans specifically, one thing that was a real problem for them with Valanciunas is it allowed ball handlers to get trapped a little bit easier off of handoffs because they weren't worried about Valanciunas slipping to the rim or too quickly getting downhill. And I think for Jakucionis specifically now with Missi there, you're going to have more of a true lob threat off of these dive actions. And I think it's going to create more rim pressure for New Orleans. And now you're giving them a passer who can throw the lob consistently, make reads off of that. I think there's going to be a lot of dynamism here as well, using, of course, Zion Williamson in the short roll. And then obviously there's still more you can unwrap with Trey Murphy, his involvement with Jakucionis. I do think for New Orleans this is quite a good pick and one that I think makes a lot of basketball sense. It might not be the highest upside grab here, 7th overall. There are some athletic limitations for Jakucionis that definitely show up in his isolation game offensively. But all things considered here, New Orleans gets someone who can really control traffic, run their offense, and initiate most of their half-court actions and do it effectively. Moving on to pick number 8, the Brooklyn Nets here now, and they have their pick of the 2 big men if they want them, Khaman Maluach or Derik Queen. In a bunch of my previous mocks, if Derik Queen made it to the Brooklyn Nets selection, he would be the guy I would circle for them. But I wanted to go a different route in today's video. 8th overall, I have the Brooklyn Nets selecting center Khaman Maluach out of Duke. And I do think for Jordi Fernandez's offense, I have talked about their zoom action and the importance of playing off of dribble handoffs and having a big at the top of the key and what that opens up for the court. And you know, Jordi Fernandez this offseason's talked about that himself as well. And I do think while Derik Queen is a more dynamic player in that sense, Khaman Maluach is a much better rim protector. Now, of course, there is a bit of context that would probably have to happen to justify a center selection 8th overall here, whether it's a Nick Claxton trade, a Day'Ron Sharpe trade, whatever that would look like. You know, ultimately, Brooklyn should be doing things that give them value and just drafting off of who they think the best player available is. You don't just draft a center to draft one because you feel pressured to take one. You draft them if you believe in them, and I do think the Nets could have some real belief in Khaman Maluach. And when it comes to the actual DHOs and playing off the top of the key, while it's not Maluach's probable best skill set, he looks still a little slow in those reads and making those decisions and sometimes unsure what to do with the ball in his hands. He did do it for Duke, though. Played in that same role that Derek Lively played in. Now, I do think for Brooklyn, if they simplified the game a bit for him and just spammed more middle ball screens, it would be great. It would make Maluach a much more productive player per minute. But it doesn't mean their team offense would be much better. And I think Maluach's screen setting ability off of DHOs would be extremely valuable. This is still kind of a, hey, there's missing context here for Brooklyn in the backcourt yet. We don't know who the long-term ball handler is going to be. Obviously, D'Angelo Russell could be back in Brooklyn. I do think Maluach is going to have a positive impact with whoever he's playing with because of his screen setting and lob threat and rim gravity, all things considered. But for Brooklyn, this is kind of step one of their continued retooling. They have 4 first-round picks in this year's draft. They could either look to package 3 of those at 19, 26, and 27 and try and move up, package 2 of them to move up. they have a wide range of options. Of course, there's the Giannis speculation. All things considered, though, here for Brooklyn, they're getting a good big man who fits for them defensively, can protect the rim, and then also offensively is accustomed to playing in a very similar style of offense that Brooklyn runs, because John Shire pushed Maluach to do that this past season in college basketball. Moving on to pick number 9, the Toronto Raptors here now at this spot, and Raptors fans are probably rejoicing, saying, hey, finally, he didn't mock us, Maluach, in this one. Yes, Maluach goes off the board 1 pick before Toronto, but it doesn't mean we're not going big man. 9th overall, I have the Toronto Raptors here selecting center/forward Derik Queen out of Maryland. And if you want to know a lot more about Derik Queen, I do have a breakdown on the channel from about a week and a half ago where I call him a big guard, because that's the way he plays. Can handle the basketball, very comfortable with the ball in his hands. I think just honestly, one of the things that stands out to me, and one of the key words I think, is coordination. For a player at his size, the variety of gathers and touch that he exhibits, especially even playing into traffic and contact, really impresses me. And for the Raptors, a team that I do think needs to inherently increase their spacing to improve their half-court team context offensively, Queen, I think, landing here in Toronto gives them a delay action big man who can catch off the top of the key, attack closeouts, has the foot speed to take advantage of slower footed centers. And you think about the Eastern Conference, while there are some very good ones, there's also some that I do think he would be able to beat out in space pretty consistently. And then when it comes to maybe his fit around Jakucionis, if the Raptors do want to play 2 bigs, which has been kind of a resurging play style in the NBA, something that I've been talking about for years. I do think 2 bigs is a huge cheat code advantage, because the more skilled size you have, the better. Jakucionis, of course, has some good touch. He's a good screen setter, can get on the offensive glass a bit. Now you put that in the dunker spot with Derik Queen. You can post up smaller players. If you have a smaller forward guarding Queen, that's going to be an advantage for him, where he can get to his either left or right shoulder hooks in the post. Obviously a very good passer as well of the basketball. I think there's a lot that you can open up here if you're Toronto. If it's Manuel quickly handling the basketball, you can hit Queen on short rolls, put Poeltl in the dunker spot, maximize a lob threat game there. I think Queen's passing is something that can continue to grow. I think there's more play styles that he's going to be able to fit around than most. And I think 9th overall for Toronto here, a team that's looking to add spacing, while it's not necessarily your true identity as a stretch big in terms of shooting the basketball. He didn't shoot the ball great this past year from 3 for Maryland as a true freshman, but he is a stretch big when it comes to the other skills, the ability to handle space, attack closeouts, drive the basketball, step out to the mid-range game, knock down shots from there. And I think that's more than enough right now for where he's at in his development. And then as he continues to grow, I am very confident that that 3-point shot will come around in due time. So I think all things considered here, Toronto should be extremely happy walking away with Derik Queen, who I presently have ranked 3rd on my 2025 NBA draft big board. Moving on to pick number 10, the Houston Rockets here now. Of course, ruffled some feathers last week with the Discord mock trades. Some Rockets fans really did not like it, but I think all things considered here for Houston, 10th overall, the ability to go out and draft, especially for a player that could make a ton of sense into their half-court context. 10th overall, I have the Houston Rockets here selecting guard Knueppel out of Duke, someone who I think is extremely underrated in this year's draft class. One of the most decisive players with the ball in his hands when he comes off of wide pin action or stagger, something he did a ton of at Duke. There's just a real calm in his game when he catches the basketball. He has already made the decision based on what his defender's doing. If his defender's chasing him, hey, I can curl this, get 2 feet to the paint, make a play from there. If my defender gets hit by a screener, goes under, it's a catch and shoot, and I'm knocking it down because he's one of the best shooters in this entire draft. I think a lot of people are going to inaccurately call Knueppel, quote unquote, just a shooter. That's not true. Knueppel is more than just a shooter. He's a very darn good basketball player, and I think for the Rockets specifically here, Knueppel measured in respectably well. He's got fairly good length and size, and I think when it comes to the Rockets picking him at 10, for a team that needs so much more shooting, while this isn't probably the best half-court fit from a creativity standpoint, because I don't think Udoka runs enough off-ball action to maximize Knueppel, I do think the presence of both Reed Sheppard and Knueppel in the Rockets rotation moving forward just inherently makes this team's offense so much better. The decision making, the decisiveness, something Reed Sheppard was really good at last draft cycle when it came to making plays with either the ball in his hands or off the basketball. And Knueppel, I think, exhibits a lot of those qualities too. I think he's an underrated ball handler. I think there's a real functionality in the way that he plays the game, plays into traffic, can play with bumps, creates his own contact to create space. Now, is there limitations there? For sure. Do I think he's going to be a 20 ball screen per game kind of guy? No, I don't. But for Houston specifically, do they need that? No, they have a very unique, skilled big man already in place in Alperen Sengun, and maximizing their team around him, I think they're in the final stages of that. It's adding shooting or adding elite talent. So a trade for Giannis, a trade for someone at the very top of the league could help move that needle for them, or putting the right pieces in place from a fit perspective that stretch the floor, make it hard to double Alperen Sengun, and really maximizes his game out of the nail. And I do think a Knueppel, Amen Thompson, and Reed Sheppard backcourt long-term really moves me from the combination of athletic gifts and shooting prowess and the selflessness that they would all have as well, with all of them being able to make reads off of a live dribble and involve their teammates in a variety of ways. I think Houston is in the driver's seat here, 10th overall. They're going to get a good prospect if they stick here and pick. And I think Knueppel is one that is NBA ready right now and serves a lot of purpose in their half-court offense. Moving on to pick number 11. The Portland Trailblazers here, I think, are a very fascinating team to discuss because there's a variety of ways that this team could look to go. And right now, after an all-defensive caliber season from Toumani Camara, a very promising rookie season from Donovan Clingan, and some other really solid bright spots for Portland, I think upside is a possible way that they look to go. So 11th overall, I have the Portland Trailblazers here selecting guard/forward Egor Demin from BYU. And this is a player who is going to really, truly impress in workouts. And I think if you look back at some of Portland's recent draft histories, specifically I want to highlight the Shaedon Sharpe selection, someone who didn't play a lick of college basketball, was still drafted in the top 10 because of a lot of his physical gifts and athletic tools. I could see Portland internally talking themselves into a Egor Demin selection. Now, notably, I am quite a bit lower on Egor Demin at this point of the draft process. I think there are some functional skills lacking in his talent that would probably limit his long-term career potential and the heights he's going to be able to reach as a player. But I do understand why some people view him as this limitless potential player, because he does stand at 6'9" and is one of the best passers in this entire draft class. That is the one thing that will always have me hold a little bit of stock in Egor Demin. This kid can flat out pass the basketball. And I think with them drafting Donovan Clingan last year, someone who's an elite screen setter, a very good playmaking hub, and a great rim protector, Egor Demin playing off of that, I do think there is some sensibility there. With them kind of combining on DHOs and with Clingan playing in delay action off the top of the key, if Demin can cut and be a connector, there is some value there for sure. Now, is this the optimized pick in my opinion for Portland? No, I really don't think it is. In fact, I would even prefer someone like Collin Murray-Boyles in this spot, even though CMB really can't shoot the basketball at all. I think all things considered for Portland, at number 11 here, Egor Demin, the tools are there, some of the physical gifts. He's definitely impressing people in front offices down the stretch of this cycle with 1-on-0 workouts and the combine where he shot it really well. Those things are going to be very important for maintaining and uplifting his draft stock, which I think he has done quite well in the later stages here. But if you go back to the Big 12 play, I think there's a lot to nitpick. I think there's a lot to be concerned about. So if you're a Blazers fan and don't love this pick, I totally get it. Remember, this is mocking what I think will happen, not what the team should do. And I would have my hesitancies if I was a Trailblazers fan. I'm just not a huge Egor Demin guy. All things considered, I think the ball handle is pretty lackluster. I think his play strength is very, very poor. I think he's afraid of contact. And I don't really say that about prospects too much. I try and stay more on the positive, optimistic side. I'm a little concerned here. But 11th overall, Portland, I think they take a swing on the upside here, specifically looking at his length, height, and playmaking skill that he already exhibits at this point in time. Moving on to pick number 12, the Chicago Bulls here. Now, at this spot, I think for Chicago specifically, already having in place somewhat of a stretch big man in Nikola Vucevic, and then obviously last year drafting Matas Buzelis, who is a skilled forward, can put the ball on the deck, create for himself a bit. Really love his gather series where he's able to gather the ball high or low and then finish into traffic as a result. Then you look at Josh Giddey, who had a very good season individually for them, really increased the pace and tempo of this team. And then Kobe White, I mean, what a continuation of his breakout as an NBA player. And now at pick 12, the Bulls are going to be able to add to that by selecting Collin Murray-Boyles out of South Carolina. And I think specifically this pick for Chicago, while it's not the most obvious no-brainer pick of, hey, let's get a shooter spacer and make the game even easier for Giddey in transition, make the game even easier for Kobe White, what it does give them is someone who can function as a short roll player. Give them someone who can be a very good screen setter for his size because he's got a big, wide frame. And I think there's a lot of connectivity here that is going to be able to open up even more of Chicago's offense, especially at the pace that they've played at this most recent season. I think for Billy Donovan specifically, giving him another skilled decision maker. I think you go back to the very early stages of Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, that core four with Vucevic there in Chicago when they were taking the East by storm a few years ago. That team played so fast. They were very connected. They passed the ball extremely well. They got a ton of transition opportunities. And I think Collin Murray-Boyles, not only can he help you score the ball in transition with his passing, playmaking feel, and IQ, but he can also trigger more of those breakout opportunities, something that Caruso did a lot for Chicago. Now, Collin Murray-Boyles isn't going to be quite the on-ball defender or passing lanes defender that Alex Caruso has proven to be throughout his long NBA career at this point, but what CMB does do is make multiple efforts, close out extremely well, block shots around the rim. He has great recovery tools where he doesn't look like he'd be an elite recovery athlete, but he just knows how to get his hands on the basketball and make plays. And I think for Chicago specifically here, there's a lot of defensive value that you can uncover with this pick. And then offensively, his play finishing as a cutter, his passing instincts. I mean, there's a reason Collin Murray-Boyles was a great college basketball player, and he's going to continue being an impactful NBA player, in my opinion, even with some of his real flaws and deficiencies. And I think Chicago here at number 12 does a pretty good job selecting him and trying to maximize their own team two-way context moving forward. Number 13 here, the Atlanta Hawks now on the clock. This pick, of course, comes from the Sacramento Kings. And for Atlanta, I think they are tasked in a weird spot right now where they're still going throughout the front office search, trying to add into their front office a bit right now. And it does give us a little bit of uncertainty with who they would look to pick, who they might target around Trae Young. If Landry Fields was still in place, we'd for sure be circling defenders and guys who can be event creators. Something the Hawks have targeted big time under Landry Fields' tutelage. That's not the case anymore. So 13th overall here, I do have Atlanta selecting forward Noah Essengue and kind of following that blueprint of, hey, let's get more long, fluid athletes and guys who can really function as a play finisher. And that's what Noah Essengue did all year long and is still doing over in the playoffs in Germany, playing for Ratio Farm Ulm off of Ben Saraf. And I think specifically Essenge's cutting tools and ability to finish in transition. You pair that up with Dyson Daniels, who is one of the best defensive event creators in the entire NBA when it comes to poking the basketball loose and making plays and getting deflections. Now you put Noah Essengue in this category as well. He's been great in the Euro Cup, where he's averaging over 1.2 steals per game, which is in the top 10 in the Euro Cup right now. And I think specifically look at his minutes per game, his event creation rate defensively. This is something that putting another big, long athlete behind Trae Young, I think makes a ton of sense. And this is where Trae Young, with all of the criticism that he gets, and I think Hawks fans can really attest to this, I think Trae Young is one of the most underrated players in the league. He is able to maximize a team offense better than most. And when it comes to Atlanta, a team that I do think is pretty talent deficient offensively around him, of course, Jalen Johnson's a beast. I love Jalen Johnson. But I think specifically, even when Jalen Johnson was out this year, the Hawks offense with Trae Young was able to stay afloat. And when he came out of the game, they weren't very good. Now, this Essengue pick isn't going to help that. But what it is going to do is give Trae Young another weapon, another option to utilize as a vertical lob threat, someone who can finish the ball extremely well in transition, has some emerging touch. Now, there is still a lot of room for Essengue to grow. I think he's got to get quite a bit stronger. And then my question is, if he does put on 10, 15, 20 pounds of muscle, which I think would be really great for his finishing skills, how does that affect his fluidity, which is what makes him such an interesting and intriguing long-term prospect right now at his height. So I do think it's kind of a catch-22 here. If he gets way stronger, it's going to help him offensively a bit, but I think it might minimize some of his defensive versatility and athletic gifts that he already has presently. So I think that's going to be one of the long-term questions for strength coaches and conditioning coaches in that weight training process for Atlanta. So I think all in all, very interesting process here for the Hawks to go through. Of course, still looking for that front office hire, and then just from there, trying to make two decisions in this year's draft that can help Atlanta long-term, whether it's around Trae Young or not going forward. Pick number 14, the San Antonio Spurs here, now on the clock after going with Dylan Harper. Second overall, they have the opportunity now to come in and draft for fit while still getting a talented piece. And of course, with the Spurs already having drafted someone in the backcourt, you are going to highlight a front court position here probably. And we're looking specifically for someone who's very capable guarding the basketball, someone who can be a very valuable team defender and gives you some versatility offensively, someone who caught and shot the ball extremely well in college and also finished above the rim very, very, very well in college. And of course, 14th overall, that player here is Carter Bryant out of Arizona. And I think specifically, if you turn on the tape for Carter Bryant, he didn't have a ton of volume. That is something I continue to talk about in these mock drafts. He had just a 16% usage rate. Very comparable usage rate to Khaman Maluach, who was, of course, a play-finishing big man for Duke. And while usage rate isn't fully indicative of everything, I mean, Carter Bryant's traditional counting stats aren't that attractive either. But the actual film suggests that he's going to be a good NBA player and someone who's going to return good value. And I think specifically landing in San Antonio here now, where you have a plethora of decision-making, ball handling around him, with Wemby, of course, being the headliner, but De'Aaron Fox, another very good guard, Dylan Harper, who I think is going to be a great NBA player, and Stephon Castle. You have guys who can maximize Carter Bryant, and even to a lesser extent, Jeremy Sohan, who I think has grown quite a bit as a playmaker from when he came out of Baylor to where he is now. So I think all things considered, 14th overall here, Carter Bryant, who shot over 70% at the rim this past year in the half court for Arizona, which is one of the most intriguing long-term numbers for him. And then he also shot over 37% from three as well in the season, with a majority of those coming off the catch. I think this is a very clean, easy fit for the Spurs of someone who, hey, if he stands in the corner, if they help off of him, he can knock down open catch and shoot shots. If they close out hard to him, he can put the ball on the deck, get to the rim in one or two dribbles, and finish from there. Or he can cut if you want to put him in the dunker spot or have him cut off the baseline in general. Wemby playing out of the short roll is one of the best passing big men in the entire league already. I think that's something that there's going to be huge value for San Antonio to play out of. So I think the key word here for this Carter Bryant pick for San Antonio is functional. Anytime that there's something functional that fits well into your team, context, and offense is going to succeed. And I think Carter Bryant in San Antonio would be a very successful pick for them with significant defensive upside to boot moving forward. Pick number 15, the Oklahoma City Thunder here now on the clock. This pick comes from the Miami Heat, of course, who limped their way into the playoffs and ultimately conveyed this pick to the Thunder at number 15. And now the Thunder here with this pick are able to go out and draft forward Rasheer Fleming out of St. Joseph's. This is not a fully polished product, and one that I'm not sure if the polish will ever fully get there, especially on the offensive end of the court. I do think a majority of the draft community right now is underrating some of the offensive limitations that Rasheer Fleming has. I think the touch is still semi-questionable, especially in traffic around the rim. I do think that's going to be a bit of a problem, and I really do not trust his ability to drive the basketball, get to the paint, and beat good defenders in the NBA. Can he straight line drive and dunk? Yes, he definitely can. He has great athletic tools and measured in very, very well at the combine. Measured in a bit bigger even than Tari Eason. And I think if you're looking at it from an optimistic viewpoint, Tari Eason is the type of player that Rasheer Fleming can probably emulate somewhat effectively. Now, there are some questions here. Rasheer Fleming, a little bit of an older prospect, multiple years in college, and he was playing in the A10, where it's just a significantly less talented conference, and you're not playing quite the high-level talent. So Rasheer Fleming, who has NBA size, NBA skills, he stood out in a big way in the A10. How much would he have stood out in the SEC? I do think that's somewhat of a fair question, but for Oklahoma City here, this addresses one of their few needs, which is another big forward defending type. Right now they have taxed, of course, Lou Dort, Jalen Williams most predominantly, Alex Caruso at times in guarding bigger players. And while that works for them because they have so many great defenders and they're switchable, they have elite foot speed, they're able to scram and help and recover and switch and close out. It's honestly the best defense we've probably ever seen in NBA history. And I know that's going to sound crazy, it's going to sound outlandish. If you think about the era that we're playing in with the amount of spacing and ball movement and shooting on the court and how hard it is to cover a team across the floor, OKC does it better than anybody. They turn guys over at will. And I think Rasheer Fleming just makes the rich a little bit richer here. I do think some of Rasheer Fleming's offensive limitations are minimized in the way that OKC plays, where him just catching and shooting the ball out of the corner or being a cutter, playing off of some of the playmaking there around Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein, who's a great top-of-the-key playmaking hub. There is enough talent around him here to minimize some of the offensive limitations, which is why I like Rasheer Fleming going to a destination that already has a lot of existing talent in place, whether that be OKC or San Antonio. I think if you put him around good offensive talent, stuff will work out just fine. If you put him in a spot where he has to be a little bit more talented, like I do think a very fair comp for Rasheer Fleming is Dorian Finney-Smith in a way. Now I do think a bit bigger, a bit longer than Dorian Finney-Smith, probably a little bit of a better athlete as well. But I think when it comes to the actual skill development, you go back to what Dorian Finney-Smith was coming out of Florida and where Rasheer Fleming is right now. Fleming, a more reliable shooter, but I think a worse off-the-dribble player. And I think that's going to be the long-term question for him, and it might be a playoff limitation a little bit, especially if he gets run off the line pretty hard. But we'll see what happens, and I think OKC, worst case scenario, he doesn't play. Oh no, what? They're going to be contenders again next season? Like, they don't need this pick. They really don't. They could burn the selection. They could pick someone for fun and still be great next year. But getting Rasheer Fleming makes them a heck of a lot better, honestly, when it comes to matching up with certain teams, certain types of players. And I think the Thunder specifically would be very happy adding his length, size, added rim protection, and play finishing tools around their existing core. Moving on to pick number 16, the Orlando Magic here now. At this spot, they have 2 picks in the first round at 16 and 25. And 16th here, I have the Orlando Magic selecting guard Jase Richardson out of Michigan State. And I think this is a great, great selection for them. And Jase Richardson slides quite a bit in this mock draft. Prior to the combine, I was mocking him fairly consistently at 11, 12, or 13. I didn't expect such a heavy amount of criticism and backlash from his combine measurements. I mean, if you watched Michigan State this year, you knew he was not a big guard. You knew that. And he measured in like that at 6'1.5" without shoes on. That's 6 foot flat and half an inch extra without shoes. So he's a true 6'2" guard. And people are going to say, well, yeah, but he's not a point guard. So this, that, and the other. I mean, he has some point guard skills and he can play with the ball in his hands. And I think for Orlando specifically, one of my favorite outcomes for them and one of my favorite outcomes for Jase Richardson specifically is landing in a context where there's already good ball handling jumbo forwards or point guards, whether it would be in LA with Luka Doncic, for example, or in Orlando playing off of Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero, because this is when you can maximize some of Jase Richardson's off the ball skills without telling him to be an off the ball guard next to another small guard. I think for Orlando, you can play Jase Richardson as your point guard under the idea that Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner are going to have the ball quite a bit, and then Jase Richardson matchup-wise fits in better around other players. Let's say if you're facing a healthy Milwaukee, which of course we're not going to see for a little while, but he can match up with Dame. Now, do you want him guarding Dame the whole game? No, but size-wise that works. And I think specifically, if you look at Jase Richardson's defensive activity level, some of the two-way upside that I think with his IQ and hands he's going to be able to play into, and then the overall dribble pass shoot skill set on offense where catches and goes, he's decisive, can shoot the basketball very, very effectively and well, and I think reliably. That's something Orlando really badly needs. I like this pick a lot for them, and they still have pick number 25 to come back and address one of their other big needs, which we'll see them do later in this video. Pick number 17 now, the Minnesota Timberwolves on the clock via the Detroit Pistons. And for Minnesota, first of all, the Julius Randle magnet ball might be over. Had a very, very rough game 2 against Oklahoma City. And I do think Julius Randle right now, while things have worked out tentatively well for Minnesota, they have big questions. He has a huge player option, nearly $31 million. Now as Reed's up for free agency, Nickeil Alexander-Walker's up for free agency. There are some real concerns here for me about Minnesota losing at least one of those three guys. And if they do, it might be in that front court, which is what I'm going to have them address here. 17th overall, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves selecting Danny Wolf out of Michigan. This has been one of my favorite mock selections all draft process long because Danny Wolf is versatile and he can fit in a variety of team contexts and offensive settings. And I think specifically if you look at one of the Wolves' most used plays over the last couple of years, their Horns flare look where they get a screen going to Mike Conley's left. They're able to hit the four-man at the top of the key and have Gobert screen and roll from there. You look at Danny Wolf's fit into that, who connected a ton with Vlad Golden in 45 action. Putting Danny Wolf around Gobert, I think, re-maximizes some of what has been lost for Gobert offensively from when he was at Utah with a bunch of good playmakers, especially Joe Ingles, who could really utilize Gobert well at that point of their careers. And then also in Minnesota when he was playing with Cat, there was that unique 7-footer to 7-footer lob connection that was pretty much unreplicated across the entire league. Danny Wolf can kind of bring some of that juice back. Now, he's not the same caliber of player that Karl-Anthony Towns is, of course. He doesn't shoot the ball as well, and he definitely doesn't pass the ball as well as Karl-Anthony Towns. I think Wolf a little bit more turnover prone as a passer than even Cat has been. And Cat throws some wild passes for sure, but Wolf has some more significant shortcomings in his game, of course, and doesn't quite have the true natural size that Karl-Anthony Towns has. But I think in kind of a pseudo-Cat fashion, can give the Wolves something that they have been missing a little bit this year, add into their front court, add another skilled, talented player, and kind of brace themselves in the draft leading up to NBA free agency this year, which I think would be very, very good for Minnesota as a protective measure for them at this point in time. Pick number 18, the Washington Wizards on the clock. Remember, they went with Trey Johnson at pick number 6 here. And now the Wizards can come back and address another need that they have, especially after trading Jonas Valanciunas away at the NBA trade deadline to Sacramento. By the way, I was not expecting to mention Jonas Valanciunas twice in this video, but I did. At 18, I have the Washington Wizards here selecting center Asa Newell out of Georgia. This is another big who can give them some real defensive versatility, plays with great mobility, and I think that motor specifically fits quite well here in Washington, where you can form some unique two big lineups if you want to, with both Alex Sarr and Asa Newell on the court together, and you can play out at the level of the screen a bit more aggressively, hedge and recover, or just flat out blitz the basketball or switch, because you're going to have another big man behind him. If Asa Newell is switching out onto the perimeter, Alex Sarr can work as the cleanup crew behind that as a shot blocker, rim protector, low man, and vice versa. If Alex Sarr is switching out on the perimeter or hedging aggressively or blitzing the ball, this is where you have, again, another rim protector with Asa Newell on the court, and it gives you extra advantages. Now, especially factoring in how many other rangy athletes this team has with Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly, that's where Washington, if you want to really maximize more length, more rim protection, more size, the better. And Asa Newell obviously fits a lot of those things. Then he also can be a really intriguing offensive short roll option and long roller. I think specifically you look at what he was able to do at Georgia this past season as a player who finished quite well with touch. Of course, got to his left baby hook quite a bit. I think there is some real touch to work with here for Asa Newell, and his ability to finish below the rim I thought was quite impressive. I think there was a pretty good early indicator for his touch improvements, especially on little 8 to 12 foot push shots. You think about the shots that Isaiah Hartenstein and Ivica Zubac make look so consistently easy. I think Asa Newell can hopefully develop into that kind of player. Now, I do think it's going to take quite a bit of work and time for him to get to that level, and maybe he never even gets to the level of those two guys who are probably two of the best in the league at it, as well as Jokic, of course. I think for Washington, there's a good amount of value here with him as a screen dive player. He has shot some threes as well at Georgia. I'm not sure if I'm going to put a ton of stock into that. I really don't need him to be a stretch big man to maximize him. Of course, now it would be nice, right? The more shooting you have on the court, the better. It's just the reality of basketball. If you have guys who have to get guarded from everywhere, it's better for your offense, surprisingly. I know it sounds so simple, and it really is, but we overthink it a lot. But I think for Asa Newell specifically, his screening, diving, ability to play above the rim a bit as well, which is something I want to see him continuously do more of and more of and more of. I think there in Washington, this could open up Bub Carrington quite a bit on his pull-up game. And I also think could be a very, very fun defensive pairing with Alex Sarr moving forward there in DC. Moving on to pick 19, the Brooklyn Nets on the clock here. Remember, 8th overall, we had them go with center Khaman Maluach out of Duke. And now at number 19, I have the Nets here selecting forward Will Riley out of Illinois. This is an offensive boom pick, one that could really bring great return results, one of the better pull-up jump shooters in this entire draft. I think he really showcased that at the NBA Combine, specifically in his off-the-dribble shooting drills, where I thought he just really impressed and measured in quite well. Measured in at over 6'8" without shoes on. I thought it was a really, really great measurement for him, one that helped solidify his stock as a true first-round prospect in this year's draft class. And I have Brooklyn as a team, if they do take more of that patient approach, which I've talked about at length before for them, going someone like Will Riley after going with Khaman Maluach, you give them a very good screen setter, and now you give them one of the more unique play finishers in the draft, where it's not just, hey, cut, finish at the rim. It's, hey, cut, maybe catch in the mid-range, or, hey, come off of a handoff, curl this screen, get to the middle of the floor and score. And that's what Will Riley can do. And then he's also showcased some really good passing tools. Now, I don't think it's a consistent skill yet at this point in time, but he's showcased and flashed some real touch as a decision maker, whether it's cross-court kicks to the corner or baseline to wing passes. There's some value here that I think can still be uncovered and kind of developed upon once he's in Brooklyn. So I think with Jordi Fernandez, who I think does a great job maximizing the skill sets of his players, Will Riley's one who I think could have a long-term real growth and development under Jordi, and I think would really find a ton of success with the Nets moving forward in his career. I really do like this pick quite a bit for them, especially if they take Maluach at 8 before this selection, giving them an elite screen and dive player next to Riley, opening up probably more pull-up jump shots against drop coverage than you could even imagine. Pick number 20, the Miami Heat on the clock here via the Golden State Warriors. And with this pick, I think Miami specifically, you just look at the roster, they are so badly in need of guard play, and specifically someone who can hopefully develop as the lead guard for their team. So 20th overall, I have the Miami Heat here, taking that stab on guard Nolan Traore, and really hoping that they can maximize this player. And there is one really unique fit that I want to talk about with Traore landing in Miami, and it specifically centers around Bam Adebayo. Traore, with all of his skills and weaknesses, I think the thing that really stands out to me the most when I do watch him play, he loves utilizing the pocket. He's got a very good first step. He's got a successful handle. Now teams are going to go under against him on screens. They're going to try and find ways to limit his rim volume, and at times that will be debilitating for a half-court offense, especially while he's still in development of his perimeter jump shooting. But I think all things considered here, with his ability to hit the pocket and with Bam Adebayo's connectivity skills, short roll talent, and his touch, the floaters, I just talked about it with Hartenstein and Zubac. I should have talked about it with Adebayo as well. He's got very good touch, loves to shoot some of those floaters. I think Miami getting Nolan Traore here is going to really weaponize Adebayo out of the middle of the floor. And now you think about the presence with Kel'el Ware, who I think the long term for Miami is probably some 4 or 5 pairings with Adebayo and Ware both on the court together. Adebayo playing out of the middle of the floor with Bam being able to throw up lobs and utilize some of his unique passing skill set is really, really good for Miami. And I think one of the best ways to maximize that infrastructure is giving Adebayo a guard who can pass over the top of the defenses. Of course, Traore, very respectable positional size at about 6'5", and passes really well on the bounce and specifically into the pocket. And I think that's what's going to open up a lot here for the Miami Heat in terms of their front court pairing with Bam and Kel'el Ware moving forward. So I think if you're a Heat fan, this is a long-term pick that right now the early returns aren't going to be elite. They're not going to be reliably great. I do think Traore as a scorer needs a lot of development yet, but I think if there's a place for him to grow and develop as a player, it's there in Miami playing for Spo, and I think this is going to be a very good long-term outcome for them as long as they're able to consistently put him in spots to maximize his actual on-court talent right now in productivity, and then also long-term development. He just needs to grow as a shooter. That's just point-blank simple. You can't be a point guard in the NBA today if you can't shoot the basketball very, very, very well. Moving on to pick number 21, the Utah Jazz here on the clock via the Minnesota Timberwolves. Remember, at pick 5 for Utah, we went with guard Jeremiah Fears, and now at 21, I think the thing I really want to highlight for Utah and that I really want to address with this pick is their team defense, where they have been abysmal. And it's not shocking. They've played bad defenders. Bryce Sensabaugh, Isaiah Collier, Keontae George. Yes, they do have some size in their front court. You think about Walker Kessler, but John Collins isn't an elite defender. Lauri Markkanen's not an elite defender, and it shows up in a big way when you play a bunch of negative defenders. Your team's probably not going to be a good defensive team. Utah needs to get better athletes, better team defenders specifically. And at 21 here, I have them going with forward Adou out of Arkansas, one of the more impactful team defenders in this entire draft class. Someone who I think can be an elite defender in a variety of different ways, whether it's on the ball. Of course, he's got some incredible physical gifts that I think will help him stand out defensively in the NBA, but then also his IQ, intelligence, off-ball positioning defensively when he's in the nail, bringing help on some of the elite players that he's going to face, or just mucking up driving lanes in general if he's helping off the corner or helping off the wing a bit on corner drives. There's just a lot of value that Thiero can bring because he's got long arms. He's got a real NBA frame. He reminds me a lot of OG Anunoby. And I think for the Jazz specifically, if you're able to get that kind of player here, someone who's an elite cutter, an elite play finisher, something that around Jeremiah Fears is going to be really valuable. This is the type of player that I think fits really, really well off of Jeremiah Fears and his playmaking. I think this is a very good draft for Utah. While, again, I'm not the highest on Jeremiah Fears, if you double down and get someone who helps your defense like Thiero does and can fit extremely well off of Fears and his playmaking and his shooting gravity, I think there's so much value that the Jazz can uncover with this pick, and I do really like it for them long-term with this selection. Moving on to pick number 22, the Atlanta Hawks here. Now on the clock, remember they went with Noah Essengue at pick number 13, and now at 22, they're going to be able to come back and continue addressing their front court with more length and size, and maybe even a bit of skill here. 22nd overall, I have the Hawks selecting center Thomas Sorber out of Georgetown. The first and foremost, most important thing to talk about with Sorber was his incredulous block rate, where he posted an unbelievable block rate, better than Khaman Maluach's even, and his rim defensive field goal percentage numbers were outstanding this past year for Georgetown. And I think if you're really trying to sell yourself on Sorber as a prospect, it stems from his rim protection ability and his shot block timing. Now, of course, his wingspan kind of stole the show at the NBA Combine. I still do have some concerns about his mobility level defensively and the activity at the level of the ball screen. I think that's going to be a very important growth area for him, but landing in Atlanta, where you now have Noah Essengue around him, you have some really good athletes and defenders in Dyson Daniels, Jalen Johnson, Zachary Sachet. This team is starting to get longer, more athletic, and way better defensively, and I really do like that for the Hawks. And I think it's going to help insulate the Trae Young aspect, but also it's going to help maximize rim protection value, and that's what Thomas Sorber is bringing. So I think all things considered, the more good point of attack defenders, the more on-ball, ball-contained defenders you have, the better to help a rim protector like Thomas Sorber clean everything up on the back end as well. And then offensively, from a skill set perspective, we've seen how dominant Trae Young and Jalen Johnson can be together on their little two-man game when Trae gets blitzed and gets the ball out of his hands early, how valuable that can be. I think Sorber's another little outlet for that. When Jalen Johnson's out of the game and Trae Young's in the game, Sorber can maybe be that short roll guy. There's been some playmaking flashes. There's been some finishing skills that have functioned out of the mid-range as well. I do think Sorber, specifically for me, the offensive skill set I still think is going to take quite a bit of time. I'm not sure I fully trust that jump shot, all things considered, but I think for the Hawks here, there is some significant value in selecting Thomas Sorber at number 22 and pairing him up with Noah Essengue, giving you two really fun defensive playmakers on the backside of your defense. Moving on to pick number 23, the Indiana Pacers are now on the clock, and Indiana, I've kind of fallen in love with one mock selection in specific for them, and it's been one of the biggest risers in the NBA Combine process, and that player is 23rd overall, Cedric Coward out of Washington State, the former Eastern Washington product, transferred into Washington State, played 6 games before having a shoulder injury that ultimately shelved his season this past year, unfortunately. But in those 6 games, he was very, very, very productive for the Cougars, where he shot well over 50% from the field, well over 40% on threes, and was extremely productive as an on-ball and off-ball player. And I think for Indiana specifically, the on-ball skill set is something that's going to be impressive and valuable for them, of course, but really the off-ball tools are what stand out to me in a big way. We see Aaron Nesmith go nuclear against the New York Knicks in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. And it brings me back to his Vanderbilt tape, where he was an elite off-the-ball player, running off of a whole bunch of off-ball screens, playing next to Scottie Pippen Jr. there in Vandy. I mean, it was just, I had so much fun watching Aaron Nesmith as a prospect. And it was a steal of a trade for Indiana to get him from Malcolm Brogdon in that deal. I think all things considered here for Indiana, like, not only are they having a dark magic type of season here with all these playoff comebacks, and if you're a Pacers fan, you got to be so optimistic anyway about your team's future. But if you can come get another shooter with elite length, Cedric Howard measured in with over a 7'2" wingspan at the NBA Draft Combine. Like, this is a player who's going to have a long NBA career probably because of the physical tools and the shooting touch. And those things around Tyrese Halliburton in a Rick Carlisle offense, around Pascal Siakam and Miles Turner and Andrew Nembhard and Shepard and Obi Toppin and all of the great pieces, Nesmith. Like, this is just a player who fits in there. And that's exactly what you want. Anytime you're drafting, if you pick a player who fits in and accentuates your already existing talent, you're probably going to be pretty happy. And I think that's what the Pacers are getting here with Cedric Howard, which is why I continue to mock him 23rd overall in a lot of these mock drafts. Moving on to pick number 24, the Oklahoma City Thunder on the clock again at 15. Remember, they went with Rasheer, Fleming, and now at number 24, they are able to go out and continue adding to their current core with another win-now-ready player. 24th overall, I have them selecting forward Nick Clifford out of Colorado State. This reminds me a lot of the Dillon Jones selection last year out of Weber State, where Dillon Jones was so productive despite being a smaller wing forward type, right? Didn't measure in elite at the combine, but Dillon Jones measured in great in the points, rebounds, assists category, where he did pretty much everything for Weber State. And if you go look at Nick Clifford this year and what he did for Colorado State, he did pretty much everything. Scored on the ball, scored off the ball, assisted extremely well, had a very good assist rate for his position, and also rebounded the ball at an elite level. I do think 24th overall here for the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that, again, I continue to say this, they really don't have a ton of needs. They don't need to address a ton of flaws or existing problems on their roster. They are just flat out extremely great and very well built. It's about replenishing depth over time, and as they do have some tough decisions at some point in time with J-Dub extension and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's new extension after his NBA MVP award, which was very well deserved, by the way. And then Chet Holmgren, he'll get an extension. While the Thunder get more expensive, especially at the very top of their roster, they're not going to really have too many long-term problems with replacing talent and keeping this team good moving forward because of all their draft picks, the ability to replace and replenish talent with rookie contracts, and drafting ready-now players like Nick Clifford, like Dillon Jones a year ago, like Rasheer Fleming at pick number 15, like AJ Mitchell in the second round. The Thunder just keep hitting, and making good decisions and making smart picks. And Nick Clifford, I think, is just another example of that here at number 24, someone who's going to fit in well and really provide more of what's already working in Oklahoma City from a skill set, talent, dribble, pass, shoot, defend perspective. And I think that's just great for OKC. Moving on to pick number 25, there's Orlando again at pick number 16. Remember earlier we went with Jase Richardson out of Michigan State, and now at number 25, they have a chance to come in here and address another need, and that is a little bit more defensive event creation in the backcourt. I have them selecting LeBaron Philon out of Alabama, and that specific skill set where his ability to drive, kick the basketball, he gets to the rim quite a bit, and I think for Alabama specifically, look at his steal percentage, which was quite good for a team defense that historically doesn't generate a ton of turnovers, doesn't create too much havoc, and honestly bleeds points quite a bit. And I think for Philon specifically, if you look at what his skill set really brings and provides to a team setting and context, I think all things considered here, you're going to be very happy with his ability to pester the basketball And I think with the right team around him, and specifically Orlando, who's so well coached by Jamal Mosley and has really built an elite team defense, getting Jase Richardson and LeBaron Philon all in one draft gives you more defensive activity, good hands, guys who are going to be able to annoy the basketball and annoy the ball handler specifically. I think those things are going to be very, very valuable for Orlando. And if you look at the Magic and how similar in some ways they are to Boston now, there are some significant substantive differences as well. The Celtics are the highest volume three-point shooting team in the league and the best three-point shooting team in the league. The Magic are nowhere near close to that, but they have very similar positional battles. You think about, the Wagner, Banchero, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum kind of dynamic. It's not the same, but it's similar. And then you think about the backcourt. If you now have Jase Richardson and LeBaron Philon, in some ways you're getting a semi-reminiscent Jrue Holiday, Derek White. Again, to a lesser degree, to a lesser extent. I'm not saying LeBaron Philon's going to be Jrue Holiday. I'm not saying LeBaron Philon's going to be Derek White, but I think he can bring some good defensive value and downhill juice as well to the Magic offense. And I think with them already having drafted at this point Jase Richardson, I think this works out quite well for Orlando, addressing their backcourt pretty significantly in this year's class if they don't trade either of pick 16 or 25 or maybe even both. Moving on here to pick number 26, the Brooklyn Nets on the clock now via the New York Knicks. The Nets, of course, having 4 picks in this year's draft, 2 of them back-to-back here at 26 and 27. This pick here, they select guard Walter Clayton Jr. out of Florida, the national champion who went on an incredibly impressive run throughout all of March Madness. And I do think at this point has solidified his stock as a top 35-ish pick in this year's class. Obviously, I would love to guarantee he'll be a first-round pick, but when teams are picking anywhere between 21 and 35, I mean, it's really a toss-up. It's more about who teams prefer. And for Brooklyn specifically, I talked about how they do have questions about the backcourt long-term. In this draft, we got Khaman Maluach and then also Will Riley at pick number 19. Now they come out and get one of the better shooters in the entire draft, someone who has a quick handle, is able to get to spots on the floor that he wants to get to, and then playing off of screens I think can be very, very valuable for Brooklyn. And his three-point shooting specifically, float game, a little bit of in-between game, that cat and mouse game that I think is valuable as a ball handler too, in kind of shifting team defenses, getting the on-ball defenders off balance a bit, putting them on their heels. I think Walter Clayton Jr. just checks a lot of those little boxes that has me pretty excited about his long-term career, and specifically his fit with Brooklyn after drafting a big man who can really screen in Khaman Maluach, another fun play finisher shooter in Will Riley. And now you get a guy who can maybe be one of the initiators of all of it with Walter Clayton Jr. at 26. Of course, a little bit of an older prospect, began his career at Iona. But I think all things considered here, Walter Clayton Jr. can really play, showcased it on the biggest stage in college basketball. Now Brooklyn solidifies all of that by drafting him here at pick number 26 in this year's draft. Moving on to pick 27, Brooklyn with their 4th and final selection of this first round go out and select wing Noah Penda out of Lamont. Of course, we've been very offensive focused with my evaluation on Brooklyn outside of the Khaman Maluach pick. We looked at Will Riley as someone who can be an offensive go-to scorer for them perhaps down the road. And then Walter Clayton Jr., another guy who can really get his own shot and score the basketball and shoot the basketball. While Noah Penda, I think, adds to that offensive context a bit with some of his playmaking juice, his ability to drive closeouts and get 2 feet to the paint and make plays off of that. All of that's valuable, but at the end of the day, Brooklyn needs to be able to guard teams too. And I think Noah Penda specifically, if you look at his success playing over in Europe, professional basketball against some of the better competition that you're going to see NBA draft prospects play against, Penda's been very successful, especially in isolation defense, where he's held opponents to sub 43% field goal percentage all year long. He's been utterly brilliant, defending some of the best in the world in a professional league. And offensively, I still think there's enough juice and growth there in his game. Now, he is somewhat reminiscent to me of Josh Green offensively, where there's playmaking and the playmaking wing thing is solid but not great. Like, how does it really fit come playoff time? I do think there's some long-term repercussions and limitations with that. But I do think for the Nets, all things considered here, they're able to take a stab on a player who projects to give good two-way value with really a real central focus on the defensive end of the court, where he's going to be able to provide some value in a big way there. Moving on to pick number 28, the Boston Celtics now. At this spot in the draft, of course, Boston, I team that has a lot of questions ahead. Will they keep Porzingis? Will they keep Drew Holiday? Will they keep Derek White even? Or Jaylen Brown? Could he possibly be the cap casualty for the Boston Celtics? I think those are some of the big questions for them moving forward, especially with a new ownership group coming in. But 28th overall, the Celtics here are able to address a need, and they go out and draft forward Liam McNeely. If they're going to look to replace any of their existing talent, it's addressing more shooting. If this team wants to continue shooting more threes than any other team in the league, which is what I'm very certain they want to do, and there's questions about Sam Hauser, could he possibly be moved? Going out and drafting a guy in Liam McNeely who was an integral part of Montverde Academy, playing off of Cooper Flagg and playing off of Derek Queen and Asa Newell, some of the elite talent that Montverde had a year ago in their pursuit of national championships at the high school level. I mean, for Boston specifically here, Liam McNeely, one, he was miscast at UConn, was asked to do more than he's really capable of doing. And in Boston, he will translate down to the fifth option on the court, a catch-and-shoot ace who stands still, knocks down wide-open jump shots, and knocks them down consistently. And you might say, well, he didn't knock down shots consistently for UConn. Again, he was miscast. So I think with less off-the-dribble responsibilities and more just flat-out catch-and-shoot responsibilities, his efficiency and value for a half-court offense is going to take upward pretty significantly. And I think for Boston especially, if they are going to make some budget cuts and they're going to lose some talent, replacing shooting, which is at the heart of their team offensive context and identity around the Jays, they need to have more shooting, and Liam McNeely, of course, addresses that here at pick number 28. Now, they could look at a big. There's a few I really do like for them at this spot. They could look in the backcourt even, depending on who they're planning on trading away, if it's Drew or not. But 28, Liam McNeely felt really safe and fits them very, very well. Pick number 29, the Phoenix Suns on the clock here. Of course, this pick comes from the Cleveland Cavaliers, and at 29, I have them selecting center Maxime Reynaud from Stanford, someone who hasn't really focused on basketball until his senior year of high school, and now as a senior in college, has really, I think, solidified himself as a top 35-ish prospect in this year's draft, someone who's going to definitely get significant first-round looks and opportunity as a possible first-round pick this year. Very good mobility skills for a bigger prospect, a true 7-footer, someone who moves really, really well on the perimeter, has some good downhill quickness and speed to him. A little bit of fun in transition, too, when he gets a breakaway slam opportunity. It's always fun to watch. And I think for Phoenix, you're looking for a skilled big man. They had one in Jusuf Nurkic, obviously didn't fit quite well. But I think Reynaud, who's a bit more mobile, a bit more agile and athletic than what Jusuf Nurkic is at this point of his career, there's value for the Suns to uncover with this defensively, with maybe hedging ball screens a little bit more aggressively and then trying to recover off of that, showing a little bit more out in the perimeter, and just having more foot speed on the court. I think it will help their team defense a bit, and then also help some of their transition offensive game too. And Reynaud, who is a skilled big, can shoot the ball a bit. That was one of the big revelations of his college career down the stretch of it. From his freshman through junior season, was shooting just a little bit over 1 3-pointer a game. This past year, basically quadrupled that volume. So I think all things considered for Phoenix, Maxime Reynaud, a very safe, solid selection for them, and kind of fits the draft MO, which we've seen recently of drafting a little bit of older college prospects. They took Ryan Dunn a year ago in the first round, who was a multi-year college athlete. And then you also look at who they drafted in the second round, Oso Ighodaro, who was a long-term staple for Marquette. So drafting a 4-year player in Maxime Reynaud is not out of the question at all for Phoenix, and I think actually is very realistic and a real possibility that the Suns will consider doing on draft night this year in 2025. Now moving on to pick number 30, the Los Angeles Clippers here now. Of course, this is their swap with the Thunder where they get the worst of the 2 picks, and now at 30, the Clippers are able to come out here and select center Joan Berenger out of Cedevita Olympia. And in the Adriatic League, Joan Berenger has been absurdly productive in his minutes. He actually leads the entire Adriatic League in block percentage. And I think for the Clippers specifically, one thing that they have continuously failed to do over the last 5 years, even longer, is address the backup center spot and actually maintain that backup center spot. For a little bit of time, just a little bit, they had Isaiah Hartenstein as the backup big man. They chose John Wall over him in free agency. It was a mind-numbing decision, one that I hated in the moment, My best friend's a Clippers fan. Him and I talked at length about how terrible of a decision that was when it happened, and they're still paying the repercussions of it. They've drafted guys like Daniel Aturu, Fiondu Kabanyele, guys who just have not worked at the NBA level. They need to draft a player who can stick and fit. And when you draft a rim protector like João Berenger, who he's still pretty raw, but has some very good physical gifts and tools, somewhat reminiscent in a way of Robert Williams a little bit with the ability to impact shots at the rim and really provide rim protection and shot blocking value. I think the Clippers here at 30, it's a very safe selection, one that doesn't come with a super huge ceiling, especially offensively. I think Berenger basically slates in to be an above-the-rim play finisher mostly in his NBA career. And I think playing off of James Harden, we've seen him utilize that play style very, very well in the past. Think about Clint Capella and how much money that guy's made in his career. Wow. João Berenger, I think, is going to fit in quite well with the Clippers here, especially with what they already have in place and the fact that with Zubac being one of the better bigs in the league, you don't need Berenger playing 25 minutes a game. You probably need him for 12 minutes a game. And I think that makes it an easier translation to his NBA career. And I think, again, you're putting him in the game and saying, go block shots, go create havoc, go be active. And if you get 4 fouls in 8 minutes, that's fine. We really don't care. And for the Clippers, I think it works out quite well. I think they have the offensive infrastructure to limit his reliance on that end of the floor. And then they also have the defensive context around him with Chris Dunn, who's an elite screen nav guy. Of course, Derek Jones Jr., a very good screen nav guy. They have the pieces around him to make his game easy defensively too early in his career. So I think all things considered, it's a pretty good fit and pick for the Clippers here at number 30. I really hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Really do appreciate you. Don't forget to comment Mock Draft Monday down below, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.